3 minutes after the earthquake. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued its first tsunami warning. They estimated waves up to 20 feet. Sirens wailed across coastal towns. Emergency broadcasts urged people to seek higher ground. This wasn't a 20-foot wave. This was a wall of water. Picture this. It's a regular Friday afternoon in Japan. Kids are finishing up their school day, office workers are counting down to the weekend, families are planning dinner. Everything feels normal. But 45 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, something catastrophic is about to unfold. Something that will reshape an entire nation. This is the story of March 11th, 2011, the day that began with a tremor and ended with a nuclear nightmare. And what happened in those terrifying hours would prove that even the most prepared nation on Earth can be humbled by the raw power of nature. Before we dive in, if you're interested in stories about humanity's most defining moments, the disasters that changed us, the people who faced impossible odds, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear is more than just a disaster story. It's a testament to human resilience in the face of absolute chaos. Let's rewind 2 days before everything changed. March 9th, 2011. At 11:45 in the morning, a 7.2 magnitude earthquake rattled the Sanriku coast. Buildings swayed, people paused their conversations, but then life went on. Because in Japan, earthquakes are just part of existence. The country sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most seismically active zones on the planet. Japanese children practice earthquake drills the way other kids practice fire drills. Buildings are engineered to dance with the tremors rather than fight them. So when 3 more quakes hit that same day, all above magnitude 6, people barely blinked. But here's what they didn't know. The Earth was trying to tell them something. These weren't random tremors. They were warnings. The tectonic plates beneath the ocean were straining, groaning, preparing to unleash centuries of built-up tension. Think of it like a rubber band stretched to its absolute limit. It can only hold for so long before snap. 2 days later, that snap would echo around the world. March 11th, 2011, 2:45 p.m. Across Japan, over 1,000 seismometers suddenly lit up like Christmas trees. The nation's earthquake early warning system, one of the most sophisticated on Earth, detected something it had never seen before. P-waves, the first tremors that race ahead of the main quake, and these were massive. Within seconds, automated systems kicked in. Bullet trains screeched to emergency stops. Factory machinery powered down. Schools across the country announced, "Take cover." But as people ducked under desks and doorways, many thought the same thing. Just another earthquake. We've done this before. They had no idea. 2:46 p.m. The ocean floor, 18 miles deep, suddenly lurched. A section of the Pacific tectonic plate, the size of California, thrust violently beneath the North American plate. The energy released was equivalent to 600 million Hiroshima bombs. A 9.1 magnitude megathrust earthquake had begun. For 6 minutes, an eternity when the ground is trying to swallow you, Japan shook. Not the brief jolt people were used to. This was different. The earth rolled like ocean waves. Skyscrapers in Tokyo, 230 miles from the epicenter, swayed so dramatically that people inside felt seasick. In Kurihara City, closest to the epicenter, the shaking reached the maximum intensity on Japan's scale. Roads cracked open. Buildings that had stood for decades crumbled like sandcastles. The quake was so powerful that it shifted Japan's main island 8 feet to the east. It knocked Earth off its axis by nearly 7 inches, and seismometers detected it on every continent. But here's the thing about earthquakes in Japan. The buildings are ready for them. Despite the violence, most modern structures held. Yes, there was damage. Fires erupted at oil refineries, painting the sky black. Older buildings collapsed. Nearly 200 people lost their lives to the shaking itself. But the earthquake, catastrophic as it was, wasn't the real killer. As the ground finally stopped moving, as people emerged from their homes and offices, as parents clutched their children and neighbors checked on neighbors, the ocean was preparing its revenge. 2:49 p.m., 3 minutes after the earthquake. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued its first tsunami warning. They estimated waves up to 20 feet. Sirens wailed across coastal coastal towns. Emergency broadcasts urged people to seek higher ground.
Where do we go? Just go, huh? Yeah, the hill.
But beneath the Pacific, something far more sinister was forming. When that massive section of seafloor lurched upward during the quake, it displaced an unimaginable volume of water. Trillions upon trillions of gallons. And that water had to go somewhere. A GPS buoy off the coast of Iwate detected it first. The sea level wasn't just rising, it was surging upward at an impossible rate. This wasn't a 20-foot wave. This was a wall of water. The meteorological agencies scrambled to update their warning. New estimates: 33 feet for Miyagi Prefecture, 20 feet for Iwate and Fukushima, but even these numbers would prove tragically optimistic. 3:21 p.m. The tsunami hit Miyako City first. This coastal town sits in a deep V-shaped bay, the worst possible geography when a tsunami arrives. Because when waves enter a narrowing bay, they don't just maintain their height, they grow, they accelerate, they become monsters. The wave that struck Miyako measured 26 feet at impact. It came roaring in like a liquid avalanche, crushing everything in its path. Now here's what makes this even more heartbreaking. Miyako was prepared. After devastating tsunamis in 1933 and 1960, Japan had built massive seawalls along the Sanriku coast, walls specifically engineered to stop tsunamis. They might as well have been made of paper. One man, I'll call him Kenji because his name was never recorded, heard the sirens and grabbed his camera. He wanted to document the wave. He'd lived through tsunami warnings before. They were rarely as bad as predicted. He stepped outside, camera rolling, and what he captured would haunt the world. The ocean wasn't behaving like water anymore. It was a solid force, pushing an entire neighborhood ahead of it. Cars, boats, houses, all tumbling together in a churning mass of destruction. Kenji ran uphill away from the coast, but the water was faster. It swallowed streets in seconds, reaching heights he thought impossible. He made it to what he believed was high enough ground. The water kept rising. He climbed higher, and somehow, miraculously, he survived. But his footage would become one of the most visceral documents of the tsunami's power, and his survival would soon feel like a curse as he watched his entire town disappear beneath the waves. 3:22 p.m. One after another, coastal cities fell to the tsunami. Rikuzen Takata, Kesennuma, Ishinomaki. Each wave was different, shaped by the coastline it encountered. In some places, the water rose gradually, a terrifying flood that gave people minutes to flee. In others, it struck like a hammer, a vertical wall of ocean that gave no warning and no mercy. The seawalls Japan had built, some nearly 40 feet high, were overwhelmed. In Kamaishi, waves reached 124 feet. At Aneyoshi in Miyako City, the tsunami climbed to 131 feet. That's taller than a 13-story building. Imagine looking up at a skyscraper. Now imagine that skyscraper is made of water, and it's racing towards you at the speed of a jet plane. There is no outrunning that. There is no preparing for that. At Nobiru School, about 200 people had gathered. Teachers, students, parents. When the earthquake hit, they followed protocol perfectly. Evacuated the classrooms, gathered in the gymnasium, conducted head counts. The principal assured everyone they were safe. The school was inland. The building was sturdy. They'd weathered the earthquake. Now, they just needed to wait. Among them was David Crum, an American teacher working in Japan. He was helping calm the kids, making sure everyone stayed together. That's when someone burst through the door. "Tsunami is coming!" The principal didn't hesitate. "Everyone back inside the school building! Move!" They ran. Teachers grabbing children, parents clutching toddlers, everyone racing for the upper floors. David saw it through the windows as they climbed the stairs. A wall of water, black with debris and mud, tearing across the landscape toward them. Then it hit. The tsunami didn't just flood the school, it attacked it. Windows exploded inward, walls buckled, desks, chairs, equipment, everything became projectiles in a violent, swirling current. David found himself underwater, disoriented, drowning. When he surfaced, gasping, he was surrounded by chaos. Children screaming, adults struggling, debris everywhere. He started grabbing anyone he could reach. A boy clinging to a floating desk, 4 kids hanging onto a cabinet. One by one, he pulled them toward the stairs, toward anything they could hold onto. The water kept rising. 2nd floor, 3rd floor. The entire school was feeling like a bathtub. When the water finally receded, David was alive. Some of the children he'd pulled from the water were alive, but 74 people, children and adults, had died in that school. And David would spend years haunted by the ones he couldn't reach. By 3:51 p.m., just over an hour after the earthquake, the tsunami had ravaged 420 miles of coastline. When the water finally retreated, dragging debris and vehicles and shattered dreams back into the Pacific, what remained was incomprehensible. Entire towns had vanished. Not damaged, not destroyed, vanished. Where neighborhoods once stood, there was now only mud, rubble, and silence. Over 18,000 people were dead or missing. More than 120,000 buildings were completely destroyed. And here's something that haunts me. Thousands of bodies were never recovered. They're still out there, somewhere in the Pacific, carried away by that merciless current. In one heartbreaking story, 2 brothers spent days searching through wreckage for their family. When they finally found their mother's car, she was inside, lifeless, along with their niece and nephew. The morgues were overwhelmed. Bodies lined the streets, covered with tarps. There literally weren't enough people left alive to process the dead. But the tsunami didn't stop at Japan's shores. It raced across the Pacific at 500 miles per hour. 12 hours later, it hit Hawaii, then Alaska, then California and Oregon, where harbors were destroyed and dozens of boats sunk. After 18 hours, the wave even reached Antarctica, where it broke off a piece of ice shelf. One earthquake, one tsunami, felt on every continent. But the worst was yet to come. While Japan was still counting its dead, a more insidious threat was unfolding 100 miles north of Tokyo, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. When the earthquake struck, the plant had done exactly what it was supposed to do. It detected the tremors, it shut down the reactors. Backup diesel generators kicked in to keep the cooling systems running. Crisis averted, right? Then the tsunami arrived. That 49-foot wall of water crashed over Fukushima's 19-foot seawall, like it wasn't even there. It flooded the basement where the generators were housed. Within seconds, they were destroyed. The plant went dark. Inside, engineer Atsufumi Yoshizawa watched his control panels die one by one. No power meant no cooling. And nuclear reactors don't just turn off. They need constant cooling or they melt down. The Japanese government ordered evacuations. First 1 mile, then 6 miles, then 12. But it was too late to stop what was happening inside those reactors. March 12, 3:36 p.m. A hydrogen explosion tore through reactor 1, ripping the roof clean off. 2 days later, reactor 3 exploded even more violently. Then reactor 2 began releasing massive amounts of radioactive gas. Then a fire broke out at reactor 4. Fukushima was in full meltdown. Radiation levels spiked to 1,000 times normal. Radioactive particles spread across Japan, drifting on the wind. Some reached the United States, some reached Europe. But while the world watched in horror, a small group of men refused to leave. They became known as the Fukushima 50. These weren't soldiers, they were engineers, technicians, operators, regular people who understood that if they didn't stay, if they didn't stabilize those reactors, the disaster could get exponentially worse. Yoshizawa was among them. For an entire month, he worked in conditions that would give most people nightmares. Deadly radiation levels, constant threat of more explosions, minimal food and sleep. I don't know much about radiation, he later said, but I knew that exposure meant certain death. Fear was natural, but we all felt a duty. The Fukushima 50s saved Japan. Maybe they saved the world, because without their sacrifice, the meltdown could have spread to more reactors. The contamination could have made Tokyo uninhabitable, but the price was steep. Over 100,000 people were displaced, many permanently. Vast areas around the plant became ghost towns. The cleanup cost exceeded $180 billion, and to this day, radioactive water continues to leak into the Pacific. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami became the most expensive natural disaster in human history. $235 billion in damages. nearly 20,000 lives lost. Japan has rebuilt, it's recovered, but the scars remain, not just on the land, but in the memory of everyone who lived through that day. Neo Kimura lost his father, his wife, and his 7-year-old daughter Yuna to the tsunami. More than a decade later, everyone else's remains have been found. Everyone except Yuna. He still looks for her. March 11th, 2011 stands as a reminder that no matter how advanced we become, no matter how well we prepare, nature operates on a scale we can barely comprehend. And when it unleashes its full fury, the best we can do is survive and remember and honor those who didn't. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the fragility of our world and the strength of the human spirit, I'd appreciate if you'd share it. Hit that like button, leave a comment about what struck you most, and subscribe, because stories like these, stories that matter, that teach us, that remind us what we're capable of, these are the stories worth telling. Thank you for watching, and remember, the greatest disasters teach us not just about nature's power, but about our own.